Good evening, everyone. This is the Parsha of Noach in the year 5783, Tafshin Pei Gimel. This evening, we're going to explore a little bit of grammar and how the Vav has multiple meanings. The letter Vav, when placed in front of a word, usually means and. It's a conjunction, and. So it would be Yosef ve'echav, Yosef and his brothers, Yitzchak ve'Rivka, Yitzchak and Rivka. However, we're going to see that there is another understanding of the Vav in front of a word, and this will play a key role in our understanding of Noach's reaction to his finding that, in fact, he was certainly humiliated by Ham and Canaan and his reaction to that. Now, the Torah tells us that Noach, upon leaving the Teva after the flood, engages in an activity for which he is taken to task by some of Chazal, and that is he decided to plant a vineyard. And of course, we all know the difficulties that arise from alcohol. And we also know that alcohol can be sacred. We know that yayin, wine, sanctifies, or at least is a precursor to the sanctification of many of our activities, whether it's a bris, whether it's kiddush, whether it's havdalah. Certainly, wine has within it a twofold opportunity. One, it could be abused, and we see the results of the terrible misuse of alcohol. But we also know that it of course, as Judaism does, it through its sanctity, of course, it can bring us to greater sanctification ourselves. Noach plants a vineyard, and he gets himself drunk from the grapes that emerge therein. He becomes drunk, and he finds himself. He doesn't find himself. His son Ham sees Noach in this state of degradation. According to some Meforshim, he found it rather humorous. So he called his brothers Shem and Yefet and told them about it. They did not find it humorous. What they did is everything the Torah tells us, they did whatever they could to maintain the dignity of their father. Even when they came to, he was at that point naked. And what they did was they entered his tent backwards even, putting a cloak over each one of their shoulders. In other words, Shem put it on his right shoulder, apparently, and Ham maybe put it on his left shoulder. And they walked in backwards so that they would be able to preserve the dignity of their father as much as they could. However, Ham and particularly Canaan, the grandson of Noach. Remember, it pays to mention here that the 70 nations, many of them bear the names of the original offspring and children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren of Noach, whether it's Yavan or Ashkenaz or Canaan or other such those who came from Noach. They eventually had children who had children who had children and grandchildren, and of course they became first a clan, and after a clan they became a nation, and in some cases they became a great nation, both in terms of population. And in terms of culture. Noach sees what has happened. He is awakened from his drunken stupor. Now, also the Meforshim say that he wasn't asleep even. He was drunk. And when a person is drunk, even though they are somewhat conscious, they are not conscious enough to act in their own self-interest. And apparently that was the case with Noah. He sees what happened. He knows apparently what happened. And here is his response. it is in Bereshit Perek Tet, Kaf Hey through Kaf Zayin. Vayomer, and Noach said, Arur Canaan, cursed is Canaan, Eved Avadim Yelecha. He shall be subservient to his brothers. And here it's Canaan. He's talking about his grandson, Canaan, eventually, who will be the progenitor of a clan, which eventually will become a nation. And of course, the Jews, his children, Noach's children, and Shem's children, etc., will come into conflict with Canaan in various different stages of history. Vayomer, and he said, Baruch Hashem Elokei Shem. But Noach said, you should know that I want to give a blessing to God, who is the God of Shem. V'hi Canaan Eved Lamo. Let Canaan be his servant. Yaftelu, then the next pasuk, Yaftelu Kim Leyefet. May God broaden the influence of Yefet. The Yishkon B'olei Shem. Now, and let him dwell in the tents of Shem, the He Canaan Eved Lamo. And let Canaan be also a servant of Yefet. Now, first of all, the term Yaf Elokim Yefet. Most Meforshim say that it means may his influence be broadened. As a matter of fact, our Hebrew word Yafet comes from that, and maybe the Torah, whether or not Noach named him Yefet at birth, or whether the Torah itself wants us to understand him in that light. But in either case, the name is his name is Yefet, and Noach says, may God broaden, widen, laharchiv, may he broaden Yefet's influence. Now, second thing we're going to introduce here is the concept of pronominal ambiguity. I've mentioned this a number of times. The he, she, it, you, we, they, I, all of these terms are pronouns. Pronoun is a word which is used in place of a noun, and what it does is it muddies the waters. When we use a name, the name is Yefet, or if it's Shem, or if it's Avram, we know. But if the Torah says, or he, or they, when it's applicable, there is a bit of uncertainty as to what it means. So let's look at this pasuk. Yefet. May God broaden the influence of Yefet, the Yishkon, and he will dwell. Who's the he? Now, we have Yefet is the antecedent. Yefet is the last noun which is used. So it makes a lot of sense to interpret the pasuk this way. Yefet. May God broaden the influence of Yefet, the Yishkon, and the vav there, the Yishkon, and may he we can easily say is the pronoun that indicates, that tells us that it is Yefet, Yishkon, and may he, Yefet, dwell b'alei Shem, in the tents of Shem. Okay? And then the Canaan Eved Lamo, that is not necessarily something we're going to focus on right now. So we have two issues. Number one, who is the he in the Yishkon? He will dwell, let him dwell. And what is he, let him dwell? Is he Yefet or some other party not directly mentioned yet? But we know that there's another name here. Yaft Elokim Liyefet. So we have Yefet and we have Elokim, which is Hashem. So now, who shall dwell in the tents of Shem? Whose influence will be the most prominent? Is it Yefet? May God bless Yefet and expand his influence, even to the point where it's going to dwell in the tents of Shem. Or could it be the other antecedent in the segment of this pasuk? Yaftelokim leyefet. May Hashem broaden the influence of Yefet, v'yishkon. But he, meaning God or the Shekhinah, will dwell. But, not vav here does not mean and, it means but yishkon b'alei Shem. If you want to know the extent of Yefet or the limitation of Yefet's influence, you should know it stops at the door of the tents of Shem. And on this, we, of course, can turn to the Meforshim. So let's turn briefly to Rashi. Rashi tells us, again, about this idea of Yafet Elokim Yefet. How expansive is the influence of Yefet? Shall it be all over the world? And you know that Yefet eventually becomes a term which really applies to all of Europe. Yefet, in one form or another, whether Yefet it could be Germany, and it could be England, it could be Rome. Okay? Again, there are times we can be more specific, but clearly it's European. So how far should this advanced culture of the Yefet be expanded? So Rashi tells us, okay, Yishreh Shchinato b'Yisrael. May Hashem Yafet Elokim Yefet Elokim. May Hashem expand Yefet, but may His Shechina, may God's presence, the divine sacred presence, be among the Jews, Israel. That's Rashi. And then Midrash Chachamim, but the Medrash of the Chachamim says as follows: Afal pi sheyafet Elokim liyefet. Rashi says, even though that Hashem expands Yefet's influence a great deal, how far? Shebana Koresh shehayam mibnei Yefet. Right? Koresh actually built the Bayit Sheni, and Koresh, who was the king of Persia, Koresh actually gave permission to rebuild the Beit HaMikdash, right? And he was from Bnei Yefet. He was the one who gave the permission. So therefore, the Medrash says that their influence extends all the way to Koresh, who is a descendant of Yefet, and he gave the order to build the Beit HaMikdash. Lo sharta b'shchina. Says Rashi, it's true. Yefet definitely expanded, even to the point where he gets credit for the building of the authorization of the building of the second Beit HaMikdash. But the caveat is, Shechina does not dwell in the second Mikdash like it did in the first. There were, of course, a number of differences and a number of elements that were in the first Beit HaMikdash that were not in the second. Heichan Shorta, where does the Shechina reside? Mikdash Rishon. It is the Shechina that only resides in the first Beit HaMikdash that had all of its necessary sacred objects. Shabana Shlomo, Hayam Ibnei Shem. So now Rashi, of course, says that we should read the pasuk as follows: Yafet Elokim liyefet. May God expand the influence of Yefet. V'yishkon, the vav here does not mean and. That it's not a continuation, but the yishkon, that Elokim, that Shechina, that will only be in the first Beit HaMikdash. And so therefore, even though Koresh certainly had a hand in the Beit HaMikdash, the building of the second Beit HaMikdash, and his influence is a part of it, nevertheless, Shechina only. That's Rashi. Now, we're going to see a different view. Rashi, by the way, we're in the year 2022. In another 18 years, in Mitzvah Hashem, we will be celebrating the Jewish world, and maybe with the Mashiach, celebrating 1,000 years since the birth of Rashi. So Rashi lived 1,000 years ago, and a little bit less. I mean, he was born or a little bit more, but he lived 1,000 years ago. However, the Baal HaMikdavar, the Netziv, who himself lived in the 19th century, was known as the Rosh Yeshiva of perhaps the greatest yeshiva, the mother of all yeshivot in Europe. He sees the same pasuk and he interprets it as follows: V'yishkon ba'alei shem. Od nichlal bivracha zo, says the Netziv, Rav Naftali Tzvi Yehuda Berlin, says, Od nichlal bivracha zo, included in Noach's bracha on Yafet Elokim leYafet, that Yafet should have expansive influence. Zo de mahar chavat hachayim shel Yafet yagia to'eret le'olam hashem. He says, you know what? The vav here is not a vav of contrast. It's a vav as. It means literally and it extends it so far. He says that the influence of Yafet will ultimately benefit the Jew. Different from Rashi. And probably Rashi would not disagree about the statement, but in understanding the vav, is the vav, the yishkon, is the vav here saying, no, that's it, but you should know, yes, he'll get a bracha, but the Beit HaMikdash and the Alei Shem and the Beit HaMikdash will only exclusively be inhabited, and the Shechina will inhabit only the first Beit HaMikdash, not the second Beit HaMikdash. By the way, it doesn't mean that it didn't have any Kedusha, the second Beit HaMikdash. Certainly had Kedusha, but it was missing item of Kedusha, and therefore the Shechina itself did not reside in any way, shape, or form like in the first Beit HaMikdash. But obviously, on Tisha B'Av, we mourn the loss of the second Beit HaMikdash, okay, as well as the first. But the second one, we mourn that. And when we think of the Beit HaMikdash destroyed, and when we look at the ruins that with Hashem's chesed, we were able to liberate Yerushalayim from the hand of the Jordanians, what you look at there is the remnant of the Beit Sheni in almost every way, shape, or form. We have very few elements, very few archaeological items from the first Beit HaMikdash. So the Netziv, though, says we should understand the two parts of this pasuk, Yafet Elokim leYafet, the Yishkon, and here it's not the Shechina, it's Yafet will even dwell. That influence that Yafet got from the bracha of Noach, because Yafet and Shem protected and maintained Noach's dignity, that bracha extends so far as to benefit Yagia To'elet Le'ol Hashem. What is that? Where do we see that it will benefit the tents of shame? So he says, because he quotes the Gemara in Avodah Zarah. Gemara in Avodah Zarah says, Tav Bet Amud Bet, B'ameh Asaktim. When we get to Shemayim, they're going to ask Rome. Rome is, of course, responsible for ultimately the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash, and each person, both collectively and individually, is held responsible for how they act. Amar Le, when in Shemayim they ask, well, what did you do? Why should you be rewarded for anything? So Rome says, Harbe merchaot. We made bathhouses that Jews and Talmidei Chachamim could use. We built roads. We built bridges. This is all in the second part of this is Bet Amud Bet in Avodah Zarah. So he says, we did it. Why? All of this enabled the Jews to get where they needed to get quicker. And so therefore, we should be rewarded for that. Of course, generally speaking, I think we can say that God could see through the plan. But, and in fact, the Gemara says that he saw through the plan, but we all tend to make up excuses for our misbehavior. So he says, well, if he's there, koi lashon v'yishkon al yaf. Therefore, says the Baal Hemik Tov, he says, therefore, there's two things we have to understand. Number one, that the pasuk is very much consistent. Starts by saying, may Yefet, may its influence be expanded. V'yishkon is referring to Yefet, not to the Shechina. May Yefet's influence expand, and it will expand even to the point that it will be of benefit to the Jewish people. And so therefore, he says, there is no transition. The vav there is and it extends this far. Rashi says, no, it will be extended, but it has a limitation. Its limitation is it ends at the door of the Beit HaMikdash. That Koresh can build the Beit HaMikdash, or at least can authorize the building of the Beit HaMikdash. But the Shekhinah will only reside in the Bayit Rishon, not the second. So there we have a basic difference between the Meforshim here. Is this a limiting vav, saying this far and no further, or is the vav of the Yishkon in the second half of the pasuk referring A to Yafet, and B expanding its influence even within the Jewish people itself? Now, we can see that actually in the Sechet Shkalim, Daf Chet Amud Aleph, we can see that where the Nitziv's view that of the great expansiveness of Yafet, meaning you say European culture, Western culture, expanded, and the Mishnah says as follows in Daf Chet. The shalosh kupot shel shalosh sa'im tor minet halishka. They had three large barrels that were designated for various different trumot, and in this case trumot halishka. And people would put their shkalim in these three kupots, and on them the katuv alehem aleph bet gimel. Aleph bet gimel. That's how they were kept. But it's interesting, Rabbi Shmuel Omer Yevanit, that it wasn't Aleph Bet Gimel in Hebrew, but rather Alpha Beta Gamma, right? That he said there, even in the Beit HaMikdash, Greek culture had extended. Now there's no Avera in that. We're not saying that there was an Avera, but they would have Alpha Beta Gamma would be very much like we say ABC. And we really don't, in our Batei Knesset, don't see that there should necessarily be any problem with English in the Beit Knesset. Certainly we have translations, not just into English, but of course, in various different countries, there are different translations. And so therefore, they are not prohibited from being in our Batei Knesset. So that's one. The second proof is from the Baal Korban Ha'eda, who is a parish on the Masechet Shkalim. He wrote, Hayu Regilim Bivanit in the Beit HaMikdash, and we do know that not only in the Beit HaMikdash, but we know that the influence of Greece extended into Jewish life in so many different ways. So many words that we have their origin in Hebrew that we use, have their origin in Greek. Sanhedrin, various other. They're far too numerous to mention, but we know that they extend into our most sacred elements. The Sanhedrin, and if we have Afikomen is of Greek origin. These words have found their way into not only into the Batei Knesset or in as the Mishnah says in the Beit HaMikdash itself, but into our daily life. They become a part of it, and that maybe is part of, at least according to the Hamikdavar, the Nitziv. Okay, that's from Noach. It says that God will expand the influence of Yefet. And they interpret it means, and it will extend, meaning to say Yefet and its culture will extend literally into the halls or the gates or to the tents of the Jewish people. Yafyafiyuto shel Yefet, the beauty of Yefet. That in fact, the Baal Korban Ha'eda says that it's beautiful. We have to recognize there is beauty in that culture. Okay, Yafyafiyuto shel Yefet yishkon be'alei Shem. We will find it in the tents of Shem. The ein lecha lashon yafeh b'vnei Yefet, and the most beautiful of the languages of Yefet is is Yavani. So it is the Greek found its way into our culture. So what do we have here? The Sikkum. Number one, Noach, of course, provides the curse. Curse finds its expression in Jewish history in various ways. Rashi says, yes, that Yefet indeed the expansion takes place, but the Shechina only resides in the first Beit HaMikdash, not in the second. The second one was built by Koresh, or authorized by Koresh, who was a descendant of Yefet. Good, he gets credit for that, right? But nevertheless, the Shechina is only in the first Beit. Then you have the Baal HaMikdavar in Netziv, who says, no, it extends even into Jewish life. And that, by the way, is not something that's disputable. We can see that there is certainly a cultural crossover into our learning, our Talmud, into of course Batei Knesset, and even into the various actions that we perform in terms of mitzvah, and that we find in Sechet Shkalim, and we find it in Forshim on the Shkalim. So we have seen that the Vav has great implication, depending on how you use it. Is the Vav a limiting or contrasting Vav but, or is it, as it's usually understood, the Vav will include, and it expands it even more. That's part of the joy of learning, part of the joy of seeing how two great, or more than two great Meforshim can look at the same pasuk, and by virtue of how they interpret the letter Vav in the word V'yishkon, is it limiting to only the Shechina? The Shechina will only be in the first Beit HaMikdash, or no, that Noach is actually his curse and blessing extends that these elements are in Jewish life. So wish everybody a good Shabbos and happy learning.